Welcome to Break from Fear with Terry Pickens, a place where we provide all the education necessary for understanding something controlling our world called survival mode syndrome. Today's video highlights pop culture's deadly diagnoses and 4 shocking portrayals and the real dangers. So in our world, lay people's use of what is called psychology terms or quote unquote therapy speak have entered mainstream conversations to describe complex emotions, often with different meanings than their clinical definitions. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, called the DSM-5 as the standard classification of mental disorders, and it's published by the American Psychiatric Association. This manual provides a comprehensive guide for diagnosing and classifying mental health and brain-related conditions, and it serves as a critical resource for clinicians, researchers, and health professionals. However, in the 21st century, lay people have pushed aside the DSM-5 and have entered mainstream conversations using psychiatric diagnostic terms on a regular day-by-day basis, describing quite complex emotions, but often with different meanings than their clinical definitions. The influence extends to social media, which has made it far too easy for people to package self-interest, personal experiences, and minimal training as if it were equivalent to legitimate clinical expertise, as stated by a LinkedIn professional and agreed upon. Today in this video, I'm looking at 4 of these diagnoses and I'm uncovering the real dangers. The first one we're looking at today is bipolar disorder. The National Institute of Health indicates that lay people often misuse bipolar as a colloquial adjective to describe normal mood swings, irritability, or change in emotions, which can trivialize the severe chronic nature of the actual disorder. What are the real dangers? Well, people frequently say someone is bipolar, quote unquote, to label them as unstable, moody, or crazy, which contributes to stigma. Now remember, people must live up to labels we put on them, and this, of course, can create stigma. Another flaw, lay people may not recognize the intense, often debilitating nature of mania and depression. Sometimes they're confusing it with simple irritability or teenage behaviors. Also in pop culture, celebrities have major influence, and some studies suggest media coverage and celebrities discussing their own bipolar disorder have made the term more acceptable or less stigmatizing, but this has also led to it being treated as a favorable or quote-unquote trendy self-diagnosis, sometimes associated with the simplicity of creativity. Symptoms like mania or irritability are sometimes misidentified as just being energetic, or conversely as simple anxiety or depression or ADHD. But it is very important to differentiate between typical emotional ups and downs and the uncontrollable extreme mood shifts of clinical bipolar disorder, which often requires professional medical intervention. Is bipolar a symptom of survival mode syndrome? Well, polarity is a symptom of survival mode. So yes, the term bipolar is used only in the sense that we humans take an extreme positioning on any polar line when we're in survival mode. For example, one extreme would be depression, while the other extreme is joy or extreme elation. Give you a reminder, the goal is to move to the center of any polar line in order to achieve balance and in order to decrease any mood instability. And of course, one modality that works well is cognitive behavioral therapy. The second diagnosis is ADHD. And let me preface by saying the DSM is indeed fallible, but at least it provides guidelines of research that keeps us on a professional path. That said, let me remind you that the DSM eliminated attention deficit disorder, ADD, and they combined it with ADHD, which I personally declare a mistake. Why? Because everybody has ADD. It's the business in our heads, but not everyone has the motor part or the hyperactivity of ADHD, which we can usually see. Lay people often misunderstand ADHD as a simple lack of discipline, rather than a complex nervous system condition involving executive brain function deficits, or in the case of survival mode syndrome, a malfunction of the sympathetic nervous system. So what are the real dangers? While biological explanations can reduce social stigma, they may also lead to beliefs that the disorder is untreatable. But we know that healing is possible with proper understanding of the why, or as I like to say, get to the root cause and you'll get to the treatment. Another danger is viewing ADHD solely through a biological lens can reduce blame, but it may make people view it as less manageable, according to PubMed research. Many people, particularly women, mask symptoms, leading to late diagnosis and disbelief from lay people. Remember, disbelief and lack of trust are symptoms of survival mode syndrome. Also, impulsivity and emotional reactivity are often misjudged as poor character rather than as malfunction challenges in people demonstrating ADHD. Lay people may not understand that feeling overwhelmed can cause an ADHD brain to freeze, leading to an inability to start tasks. This is the same positioning in the amygdala of taking the position of fight, flight, or freeze. In this case of ADHD, what's called ADHD brain freeze is the chosen path of freeze, the chosen position. Individuals with ADHD may feel misunderstood and may face challenges in forming connections, according to YouTube. Lay people often fail to realize that individuals with ADHD may experience intense emotional pain from any perceived rejection. Well, despite these challenges, many with ADHD are highly observant of social dynamics due to hypervigilance, as reported on Instagram. So the question is ADHD a symptom of survival mode syndrome? Remember, ADHD is a symptom of survival mode syndrome, and the brain freezes what happened in early childhood when the child's underdeveloped brain, without the capacity to understand the context of most things that happen to them on a day-to-day basis, became fearful, and our premature brain interpreted these fearful experiences as dangerous, triggering our internal alarm even when there was no real danger. This, of course, causing the brain to become frozen in a protective posture. In other words, the sympathetic nervous system stays active. Well, whether it is the old ADD or the new ADHD, it's an emotional response to fear. How does fear feel? It's like an intense, overwhelming, or persistent sense of danger, anxiety, or panic, often accompanied by mental racing, dread, or a compulsion to avoid situations. It ranges from mild worry to severe terror, causing hyper-awareness of our surroundings, mental freezing, or a strong urge to escape. This is when a position of fight, flight, or freeze is established. The third diagnosis we're looking at in this video is narcissism. Lay people often use narcissism as a colloquial term to describe selfishness, vanity, or difficult personalities, frequently overusing or misapplying the term. While it is a clinical diagnosis, narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, public discourse often incorrectly uses it for anyone displaying grandiosity, self-centeredness, or lack of empathy, thus trivializing the severity of this psychological disorder. So what are the real dangers? Well, first and foremost, overusing and mislabeling. Many people call others narcissistic to describe anyone who's conceited, selfish, or ignores others' concerns. It is used colloquially as a generic insult for anyone who brags, hogs a conversation, or is vain. Another danger is a misconception of the term "I talk," quote unquote. Contrary to popular belief, though, using the words "I," quote unquote, and "me," quote unquote, frequently is not strongly correlated with actual narcissism. It is a communication skill or strategy often used to take ownership or take responsibility for one's own actions in a discussion. There's also a social media focus often applied to individuals who post many selfies or seem overly obsessed with their looks. What are the differences between lay and clinical understanding of NPD? Pathological versus personality trait. While lay people use it for annoying personality traits, clinical psychology defines narcissistic personality disorder by intense grandiosity, a lack of empathy, and a strict need for admiration. Layperson diagnoses are often inaccurate due to a lack of professional training and the failure to distinguish between healthy confidence and pathological grandiosity. This can also trivialize the condition, and overusing the term reduces the seriousness of the diagnosis for people with true NPD. Let's look at improper social labeling. Labeling individuals, especially young people, based on temporary narcissistic traits, example in adolescence, is seen by some as quite harmful. So the question remains, is narcissism a symptom of survival mode? Absolutely. Survival mode is the me, myself, and I mode. And it's due to the goal when in that mode, the goal is kill or be killed. It's self-defense. It is a narcissistic trait because each of us have a built-in survival mechanism in the sympathetic nervous system that only we can use. Narcissistic traits can be a coping mechanism used to mask vulnerabilities or maybe overcompensate in relationships. That said, we'll move to the last, number 4, which is fawn, and it is really not a diagnosis, but I included it here to illustrate how much influence popular culture can have even at times on science. So the fourth I'm looking at, the fourth used is fawn. Fawning is a term increasingly used by lay people to describe a specific trauma response characterized by people-pleasing, appeasement, and over-accommodation in order to avoid conflict or to ensure safety. It was coined by psychotherapist Pete Walker as the fourth F, quote unquote, of trauma, alongside fight, flight, and freeze. It is commonly used in discussion about complex PTSD, childhood trauma, and abusive relationships. But you know what, folks? We don't need a fourth F, do we? Are there real dangers with fawn? According to Verywell Mind, using the term fawning as a trauma response is dangerous. Why? Because it can be misinterpreted as voluntary, compliant, or manipulative behavior rather than a survival mechanism. It often leads to victim blaming, severe mental health issues, chronic boundary violations, and a complete loss of self. So what is fawn in survival mode? There's no need to reinvent the sympathetic nervous system's fight, flight, freeze responses or alarm, which describes each individual's response to fear. This response is hardwired in us to help protect when we sense danger or we're under significant stress. Lay people's understanding of a trauma response is simply they're describing survival mode syndrome. Imagine that. And they're describing how our childhood environment formulated our personalities. All of these responses are not fawn. They are survival or defense mechanism, be it people-pleasing, fear of conflict, perfectionism, people who can't say no, etc. Remember, defense mechanism are unconscious psychological strategies used to protect the mind against anxiety, shame, or threats to self-esteem. They function by distorting reality to manage difficult emotions. While they provide us temporary relief, any over-reliance on them can also hinder personal growth and they can affect your relationships. Defense mechanisms are also symptoms of survival mode, and the goal is always to get out of that mode. Finally, there's a paper that supports survival mode syndrome, and I will drop a link below. The title is "The Body Does Not Store Trauma. The Brain Dynamically Reenacts It Through Maladaptive Inference." This paper, to me, describes the child's pre-developed brain becoming frozen in that protective posture. So go ahead, click the link below and give it a read. It is the end of the video, but my final warning is, if we must protect the most vulnerable seeking help in our society, we must stop blurring the lines between legitimate clinical experience and the whims of popular culture. This is all for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you next time.